So, kia ora everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are Rachel and Mark from AUT. We're both learning advisors. Mark's been with AUT for about 12 years, and this is my 4th year in the role. And we're going to be talking today about the challenge of generating meaningful evidence of our impact. And this has come from a session that we ran in ICALD in an international symposium. So we're sharing the outcomes of that session, but also we're going to ask you to contribute your ideas, your comments, your feedback as well, so that we can sort of continue the conversation. So in the session, we had 2 provocations that we were talking about. Provocation 2 was, what types of evidence are we actually providing of impacts to institutional leadership? And provocation 3, well, what types of evidence should we be providing to leadership instead or as well? Big topics, big challenges, and hopefully we have some sort of shared experiences with this. So the first thing I'm just going to ask you to do is just to start thinking about impact and thinking about your own context. In one word or phrase, what does impact mean to you? And you can just pop that in the chat just to see what you're thinking and what impact. Thanks, Quentin. Thanks, Michael. Yep, awareness, understanding, appreciation, difference, making a difference. Yeah, making a difference. Oh, there's some common themes there. Development, growth, learning, being. Yeah. I can still see a few comments coming. Acknowledgement. Yep, great. A therapy. Yeah, interesting and wide sort of interpretations of what impact is and what impact means to us, and also what impact means to students. So when we're thinking about impact, to sum up, we can see that impact is inherently complex and messy. And as lots of you said and pointed out, learning advisors are deployed to make a difference. And how making a difference is interpreted can vary in the roles that we do and in the jobs that we do, because we have variations in context, and there's flexibility in the nature of our learning advice positions. But that also means that there's a lack of consistency in collecting evidence. And more recently in the session, the feedback from the group of people that we were talking to, it really came out that there's a lack of awareness of our roles. And through that lack of awareness of our roles, there are questions of credibility and professional recognition. So we may make an impact, but because of that lack of awareness, who sees that impact? Who does it get communicated to? And how do we communicate it? What do we collect, and how do we communicate that to be effective, to show our value? And so this is really important because obviously lots of institutions are having changes, budgets are tightening, and it's really important that we can identify what we do, collect evidence of what we do, and then demonstrate the value and the impact of what we do. So when we're talking about impact, we're interested in the impact of what, on what, and who it's communicated to. So if we think about our positions, what we do in our day-to-day jobs, for example, embedded teaching activities, how do we know that it has an impact on student and staff? So we collect evidence for this through evaluations, feedback and research, which then gets communicated to our department, our institution, maybe the wider academic community. So thinking about what we do on a daily basis, how do we capture that? How do we look at our embedded teaching activities, our generic workshops, our one-to-one consultations? And that's what we were looking at. And we gave participants in our workshop some questions to think about, and to think about how are they collecting evidence of impact, and then who it's communicated to. So Mark's going to talk about some of those findings.
Sorry, John. Yeah, so we used a Microsoft form during the session at iCalled. We actually ran it twice, a couple of different times on that day, just according to the way the program was, to enable people from the different associations from the northern, the southern hemispheres, and western, eastern parts of the world, etc., to have the best chance of coming. So, we had 17 learning advisors from all parts of the world join us. And the pie chart that we're looking at here is the data that we were able to extract from what people put into the form. And we basically asked them, what is the current evidence that you gather about the work that you do. So in a nutshell, really, the red bits, the fuller red and the lighter red, that's all perceptions from staff or from students of how people receive the work that we do. So it might be through informal anecdotal stuff, or it might be through surveys and questionnaires, that sort of thing. But yeah, this is what people think is happening and what they say about it. And you can see that accounts for the huge majority of all the information that we collect, and that's across that group of 17 people who were there on the day. And as I'm talking through this, it's just useful for yourself just have a little think about how similar or different that might be from what the data collection, the evidence that you gather is in your institutions. So that sort of huge sort of preponderance of what people think or feel, and that's really good stuff, of course. But there's not that much of the rest of it, really. So we've got in the purple, this is all kind of to do with online resources. The fuller one there, in terms of just gathering analytics data out of, for example, learning management systems, number of clicks on this page or number of times that page got viewed, that kind of information. And then the lighter of the purples is some user experience, where you get people to test things out and talk to you about what they're doing. That's a pretty small portion. And then the grey bit is looking at student attendance. So we're all pretty good at saying the X number of students attended X number of classes, that type of thing. And what was a little bit, from our point of view, I suppose a thing for us all to think about, really, is the thin slices of green, which are so tiny. What does it say? 2%, 1%. So basically, these are changes in student outcomes of some kind. So the lighter of the green and the darker green, which way around is it? Changes in student writing. So looking at people's work to see evidence of things we've taught them, for example. And then, grades for academic performance was how we explain that. And then all of those tiny little ones you can see there, which are maybe one or two people mentioned. So that's what we found in that group of learning advisors who came to the iCalled session. And it, in a way, is quite similar to this pie chart, which was an outcome of a systematic review that I did with one of our colleagues at AET, Lucy McNaught. where we systematically searched for studies that provide some sort of empirical evidence of the impact of embedding academic literacy into course content. What we ended up with were 20 published studies that met our inclusion criteria and got through quality appraisal. And you can see, just looking at the pie chart again, the colours represent the same types of evidence and what's reported. And you can see quite sort of a crossover with what we found with the learning advisors at iCalled. You've got that massive sort of focus on what people say and think, so the red bits. And that's almost the same with this stuff just about embedding that we found in the published studies. And what a sort of difference is, there was more of a focus on changes in student outcomes, like their grades and their writing. Yeah, so what that sort of is making us think is that, yeah, we're very good at collecting how people feel and what they say, but we're not necessarily getting more of the other types of information, or not enough, perhaps, of those other types of information. So, and just drilling down a little bit into the types of data that were being used there. So, or what we were gleaning from them. So, this is from the iCalled session with the learning advisors on the day. So basically, a lot of people are using questionnaires and getting anecdotal feedback. So that's where all that perception stuff comes from. So, and then you've got your attendance rates, obviously. And if you want to get information about, for example, changes in academic performance, then you're going to need to look at grades or look at students' writing. So, but we can see that there's a lot less focus on those things. Yeah. So, look, Rachel's very good at these photos. So what we were thinking is that we're on the left there as learning advisors. We're sort of a little bit fed up with the way certain things are, and we think, well, what can we do to demonstrate the impact of what we're doing? And unfortunately, the people on the right are who we might be giving this information to. I think he's frustrated, this man. He seems to have a pie chart, which is a bit of a shame. I like pie charts, are nice. Yeah, I think what we're trying to think about here is we're frustrated with how things are, and the people we're reporting to maybe don't take too much notice of what we're saying to them. So maybe we can work out how to enhance what we're saying, or the ways that we're saying it. So looking at perhaps changing how we gather the information and how we communicate it, so that we can make a stronger case. So what we are looking at the moment at AUT, we've got a couple of different projects that we're doing that are ethics approved research projects. So one that Rachel and I are currently working on, and we love an acronym. It's called IDEAL, which stands for Impacts and Descriptions of Embedded Academic Literacy. And what we're focusing on in this project is an embedded collaboration that we have in place with a first-year business course. We're looking at the cohorts in semesters 1 and 2 this year. It's a really large course, which all of the students in that program are in. Roughly 600 students this semester, and probably the same next. And we've got 3 questions we're trying to answer. So we're looking at what are the pedagogies that we're using for embedding, what are the impacts of the pedagogies on the students and the teaching staff that we're doing the collaboration with, and what are useful ways, effective ways for us to research into this work. It's not really that clear how to demonstrate the impact of the things we're doing, and how to do this in a meaningful way that other people will want to read about. But just focusing on looking at the impacts and how we're planning to try to gather that information in this project. We've got ethical approval to get the grade distributions for the whole cohort, so that would be kind of identified. We're looking to get students sharing their marked work with us once they've been graded and everything. We're also gathering in the usage of their LMS course and the resources that we create in our LMS course from our team, and also looking to talk to some students about their own activity as well. So we'd have like aggregated data, like this page was viewed X times, but also be able to track this is what one student did in terms of the resources in that course when they did it and that sort of thing. We're also going to gather what people think and what they feel by giving the students a questionnaire, and also the teaching team in that course a questionnaire. Oh, sorry, I've left them out. And we're also going to interview some of the students and do a bit of user experience with them on the online resources. And then the project team, which is learning advisors and a lecturer, we're interviewing them as well for how they've experienced the process of embedding. So what we're trying to do here is gather as many data points as we can and triangulate them in any ways that we can see are going to make sense in order to provide some sort of hopefully persuasive set of information about what difference are we making. And that could be any number of types of difference, as you were saying in the chat earlier. It's quite a broad area. So that's something we're doing at the moment. And just sort of jumping back to what we were doing in the symposium at ICOL. After we had asked the participants, what do you do currently to gather evidence of your impact? We then moved the question on to, if you didn't have to worry about limitations, what kind of changes would you want to make to how you gather evidence? So not worrying about any sort of practical limitations, just what would you like to be able to do? So real blue sky thinking. And what we found were four sort of, I suppose, overall, sorry, that's five, isn't it? Overall themes. So some of it related to gathering course specific data or program specific data. Some people referred to doing comparative studies, looking at different cohorts. Others then brought up this idea of how we implement feedback and interventions. Some were talking about doing longitudinal studies, and then we had this idea of holistic impacts and how we might look at those. So in terms of the course and program specific data, I think what we were looking at is trying to identify the impacts through increased specificity, basically. So if we can gather information about individual course outcomes and programs, and the challenge we face, and I'll get to this, is how do we access this sort of information? Because we don't tend to have it as a centrally located team. And then for those of us that are in the position to do this sort of work, which I think some of us are and some of us are less so, is to try to compare, across different cohorts. If we're embedding, if we're not embedding, if we're embedding in this way or embedding in that way, what differences do those make to the outcomes? And then, if we can gather from students, how they are integrating feedback that we give, can we start to chart a little bit? Well, this is a difference that this has made, because it is really difficult to prove. And in a longitudinal sense, if we could follow students through their studies and gather the information with their consent, of course, about how and when they're engaging with what we provide, whether that's individually or in our resources or coming to workshops, whatever it is, what choices they're making, what impacts is that having on their performance, and also if we look at the life cycle of the student outside of the graduation and what do they say about what's what's been useful to them carrying forwards into their career, for instance. And I think, yeah, we were quite conscious that we don't want to sound cold and sort of quanty. We think it's really important that we do gather from students that sort of rich information about how it's impacting them, the work we do, and what their journeys are. So I think we've been quite good at that over the years as a profession. This last one, and it's definitely something we need to keep doing. But perhaps we need to balance it a bit with some of these other things. But yeah, as I mentioned, people did say, yes, we'd love to have all of this lovely information, but yeah, there are things that get in our way. So these were basically what some of the barriers that people shared that they face, and I think most of us will find that we have a similar experience, right? But yeah, essentially, just trying to thematize that a bit, we thought, well, one issue is that not all learning advisors have got the same skills and knowledge, and that is specifically around, well, how do we identify and manage relevant data about the outcomes on students, the student experience, all of that stuff. Then there's this issue of access, and that can include just access to data for our reporting purposes, but also access to data for research purposes. And then there's access to the lecturers that we need to work with in the curriculum. And then, as Rachael mentioned at the outset, a strong sort of issue there that was clear was that people don't really understand what we're doing. And that applies to students and to staff. And it manifests in people not taking us seriously, as well as just not knowing that we exist at all. But we didn't dwell on the negatives too long, thankfully, and we also were able to glean from the group what might be some ways to be proactive and address these things. And it really, I mean, a key thing was collaboration, and that would involve collaboration, perhaps within our own institutions as well as across, to share skill sets, knowledge bases. So if we've got people that are really good at quantity data collection and analysis, maybe we can share that knowledge a bit. And that could be with people that are inside your institution or with other learning advisors at other institutions. And then, we ideally want to be effective at reporting what we're finding if we're going to raise our profile and raise the understanding of what we're doing. And in some cases, if we can then disseminate that in research outputs as well. But yes, I've prattled on long enough.
Well, I was going to say, does anybody have any questions about what we've talked about so far? Just any comments or any feedback on the previous slides? Anybody want to add anything or add any barriers or challenges or success stories in collecting impact?
I'm a bit curious that you've got a strong focus on embeddeds, and I understand partly why that's the case, but just wondering how you made that choice, how you would address those kind of things, like with one-on-one appointments or the generics, or is that not as helpful for what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I think this applies to all of the strands of LA work, really. So yeah, at our team, we've got more of a focus on embedding, but I think we have to think really proactively about, based on the work streams we focus on, how can we be proactive essentially in reporting them and showing their worth, showing their value.
And I think probably in the project that we're doing the investment over time, because we're doing it over 2 semesters, so that being able to work with the same people. And I think we invested a lot in establishing relationships and making connections and going through the ethics process all together. So we've sort of all invested in a project that we can see and that we're committed to, I think, too.
No, it makes sense. It does make sense, yeah. And you can't really practically do everything all at once anyway, right? And this looks like it's, we're all have most of us have seen lots of research about how effective embedding is, so that makes sense to make that a place to start for sure. And all those relationships surrounding it are embedded within your research methods as well. So yeah.
I mean, and even the engagement or participation of students, I think at all of those, even one-to-one or generic workshops, even getting students interested in. And by being embedded, we've got lecturers and student success who are also invested in it too, so they can help us sort of promote the research and help us in. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, thank you for
Thanks. That. Anybody else? There was another question.
Kira and Mark and Rachel, it's not a question, it's a comment. I'm very impressed and enlightened to see that, the types of feedback we collect. And I realized, yes, indeed, the students' perception and staff perception are most ones that I focused on. So now I think, I will include more and more their success rate, and also, Anyway, so from the evidence of their pass rate and all of that, the grades, how we made an impact. I have made an impact in their success. So thank you so much for this so far. I'm still listening. Thank you. That's all.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Well, I think it's always very difficult to prove, what it was that made the difference to a student. But if we can gather more and more points of data about it, I think we're in a stronger position to make that sort of case, right? Make that sort of claim. If we can get what they said they thought was happening, and also more bits of information about things that changed for them, then that can only help, I think.
Yeah. And, one of the colleagues said to me, she can see that students are transforming in front of her eyes after she come regularly, to see me weekly. So, this is from just another perspective. It is still perspective. But they told me that they're getting A classes and A's with their assessment. So this is kind of still anecdotal. So I may need to have a systemic way to collect data.
Yeah.
And tap in, you need to find ways of tapping into getting the attendance and academic performance if you can, to back up those stories and to back up those successes. Yeah.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. And then Quentin emphasised cross-department connections. Yeah, researching, publishing with faculty lecturers and professionals, student service professionals. Yeah, a balance of qualitative and quantitative. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why it's really good to leverage your collaborations, because not everyone's going to know how to do all of those things. There's a few of us maybe who are exceptional, but it's certainly not me. So I think if you've got different knowledge bases that you can integrate into a team that's doing a project, whether it's a research project or just something practical that you're reporting on for your institution, it's great to be able to leverage that sort of knowledge, isn't it? Make the best of it.
And I think if we're thinking about the feeling of the sessions that we ran, there was a lot of frustrations with the systems and with the institutions that people work in, but those things aren't going to change. Some things we can't change, but we can look at what we can access or who we can work with at that level. So I think that idea of we might not be able to do some things, but within our job descriptions, within our lane, within our remits, what can we do, and how can we get that information, and how can we talk to our leaders about why we need that information? Yeah,
I think one of the funniest things that someone put in the form about barriers was leadership, and what the solution was. Basically get rid of them.
Sack them all.
So, which was, understandable, but what can we do really. That's what Rachel was saying. What can we actually do?
Thanks. Yeah, Craig says, can relate to everything you've covered. I'm regularly being asked from above for evidence of my impact. To me, the challenge is how we can quantify individual impact. Yeah, exactly. There are so many factors, but yeah, what can you tap into? What can you use to support those statements and your impact? It's a tricky job. So maybe we've just got maybe last 10 minutes. What we're going to do is just ask you to think about, is there anything that you're working on? Are there any projects that you are thinking about collecting evidence? Is there something that you dream of doing over a long time if you had the resources and the staff? So perhaps if you want to share live, turning your mics on, or in the chat, and just have a look at the questions on the slide. So in your own institutional context, without any limitations, what changes have or could your team make to types of evidence you're reporting on? And what barriers do you face in doing so? So think about your own context. We all have different barriers and different teams, and perhaps think about how you might overcome these or any other comments. So we'll just, if you want to share, please share, or have a think and think about what would you like to work on? What would you like to see happening? Number of clicks or number of touch points. Yeah. So almost you need another step of, so what does that mean? What does it mean, the touch points? How do we know that they've done anything with the resources or the information?
So I'd like to share, if I have space to do so, a project that Steph and I, Dr. Steph Clout is an information literacies librarian with whom I've worked with the faculty lecturer over the past couple of years, since 2022, and we've started a research project with the paper leader, and he has written glowing appraisals of our embedded impact, all qual, but he has referred also to the effect that our work has had on student success. So, prompted by our manager, we are starting on this two phases. So the first phase this year is a reflective ethnographic publication, and then next year we'll look at getting some sort of ethics permission to engage with data. So we might appreciate some input guidance from you, Mark, and Rachel, when we look to moving on to the quant phase. So just putting it out there, we've started, and we'll keep you posted.
It's exciting, isn't it? Yeah, it sounds great. And thank you, Hua, as well, for your comment. Just making sure I'm reading it properly. Yeah,
Data collection. Yeah.
I think that's speaking to a reality that we're all faced with. I think is the capacity in the team that you're in, as in not ability. I mean, like, is there space to actually do that work, and can you have someone who can focus on it a bit in amongst the other parts of the role?
And you have systems that you can get the data from. Like, that's the other thing. Are you tapping into the systems like your LMS or other things that you could capture if you knew how to? I think that's also the other.
But it's good to have someone who's got that sort of remit, right? So to drive it forwards, to make it happen, and collaborate with the people in the team as well. But if no one's steering the ship, as it were, then that's really challenging, isn't it?
And again, I think that was also feedback from a lot of the learning advisors around the world was that access to, how do we get access to data? How do we have rights to talk to, how do we get access to students? There are still sort of those barriers in people thinking about what we do and whether, and the fact that we have to get ethics to talk to students. But there are other ways of doing it. There are other sort of research you can do. You could be doing action research, or you could be doing case studies. There are other ways of showing your impact without having to do ethics approved research as well.
So maybe
collaboration comes into it.
Maybe establishing such a role for one person to do it at the institute is a way to acknowledge our profession.
Yeah. Sounds like a good recommendation to be making.
Thank you, Mark.
Would anybody else like to share any ideas or any projects that they would like to do or are doing? I think something that came up in the workshop as well was sort of tracing students in their student journey from being an undergraduate through their semesters, through their years. So
I could mention something that we're doing in our area.
Right.
So, we haven't done much in the way of collecting information, which we should have in the past. But as you know, in the current climate, that's really, really important. So our team got together. We thought our managers were going to work on collecting evidence, but we all got together and I know this will be back to front, but we just produced we've got a QR code that links to a 12-question questionnaire, but the questions, they're very quick for students to answer. So it actually only takes them about 2 minutes if they don't write a lot of comments. They can if they want to. So that gives us qualitative evidence. And then one of our newish team members, he's got a PhD. So he was happy to, like Huadai is talking, he is happy to be the person who all the information goes to. And then he sends us, he's done it once. he sends us the information once a month, collated information about what students have said if they chose our name. So that's the first question. It's all the different learning advisors, and they have to indicate who it was who was embedded in their class, or who they had a one-to-one with, or it's small group facilitated support and workshops. And so then he made, I know you can't see this either, but our workmate made us a little checklist so that we didn't have to remember everything when we were with a student, so that we remember how to introduce, that we want them to do the feedback. We say that at the beginning, remember to introduce who we are, because often we forget to say, hi, I'm Anthea, and what the session type is, so they know which one to check for that. Then we have to deliver the support, and we have to remember to check their understanding from time to time. And then there's a few things for us to check in the closing as well before we deliver the post-session feedback form. So that's been quite useful.
Sounds really practical, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To gather more about the difference you're making on that individual.
And allows for consistency amongst the team too, doesn't it? It's sort of everybody's doing the same thing, so then it gives you something more. You can use that feedback in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, and we put the QR code on the walls of the rooms that we see the students, because it's very easy for us to forget to ask them to fill the form in. But so that's what we've been doing anyway. So
great,
so much for sharing that. You've got a comment in the chat, Anthea, from Claire, asking if you'd be happy to share what's in your form.
Oh, okay. So I'll write down. Oh, Claire, can you send your email address in the chat, and then And I'll check with my other workmate if I'm sure it will be fine, but I'll just double check anyway.
That's a good outcome. Yeah.
So we've got a couple of minutes. Does anybody else have anything they want to share or any comments? Any other projects?
Yes, I have a request. So,
Yes.
Mark and Rachel, we've touched on this idea before in the context of Atlands, but I think what I'm heading towards is the idea of some sort of Atlands repository of resources. So, for example, an ORTEX, so an ethics application, key considerations, variables, framings, the sorts of language that you've obviously labored over, sweated blood over to get it quite right, and then it's worked. So to share those, so for the rest of us who are following in your footsteps rather than reinventing the wheel, that would be quite helpful to have those sorts of resources.
Well, yeah, I mean, the process of getting the ethical approval for the project that I mentioned that we're doing at the moment, it was pretty long-winded because we were asking for all these different data types. And the initial feedback was, our from our ethics committee was, our form for applying for ethics is set up for small projects, and yours is quite complex. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, so I want to find out all these things. If your form doesn't let me do it, that's your problem. But it was a pretty lengthy process. I've been through ethics applications, before, so I was ready for it to be challenging. But I think ultimately, and sort of responding to what you're saying, Quentin, it would be really helpful if I could talk to the committee here to say, hey, this is what you ended up approving. This is where I started. Mm-hmm. It would be nice for you and for people like me if we knew roughly, if I want these things, like access to these types of data in this way, what do I need to tell you in a succinct and concise way as possible to save everyone the bother? And that would be great to share. But I haven't done that yet. I don't know how conducive they're going to be to me asking, but I'm going to try. Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Julie. See you. We'll start finishing off. We've just got 2 more slides, just so everybody may have to go off by 1 o'clock. So just to finish off, just to sum up, really, and obviously going back to the title of our workshop, Tracing the Ripples to Make Waves. Clearly, if we want to make waves by generating meaningful evidence of our impact, we must trace the ripples. And tracing the ripples means collecting various types of data and triangulating them. So thinking about other ways and other types of evidence that we could be doing to show our value. And I think, if you want to see how we collected the responses, so we did in the sessions, we had 2 Microsoft forms with the questions you saw previously. And what we did was we invited people to fill in the forms, and then we sort of did a live conversation, chat through some of those questions, and invited people to talk to their points if they wanted to. So if you want to see what that form looked like, you've got the link and the QR code there. And thank you for joining us today. Really great conversations, really great to hear what other people are doing and thinking about. And we did write up the findings of the ICOL session in a blog. So there's the link to the blog there. And I think Mark's just popped it in the chat. And if you are interested in finding out more about what we're doing, or if you'd like to share and keep going on the conversation on how do we collect evidence for impact, you can contact us on those email addresses, or you can pop your names in the chat if it's something that you'd like to do.
Yeah, we did get, when we ran the session at iCold, we asked the same question to people who participated if they wanted to continue talking about this after the session, and we had got a number of people add their name to that list. So if you want to join, I don't know quite how we're going to make that a thing, whether we just email each other every so often or whether we get together. But I think it's a really useful thing as a profession that we are sharing, and that again, talking to Quentin's point about, how can we share knowledge that we have and build forwards to some sort of capacity to communicate our worth, basically, is what it's all about. Yeah, sorry, Rachel.
No, that's all good. All right, so thank you very much. Nice to see everybody today. Thanks for your nice comments. Enjoy your long weekends when they come.
Yours starts now, doesn't it?
Ka kite.
Thanks,
Ka
everyone.
kite. Thank
Ka kite,
you.
ano.
Everyone,
Bye now.
thank you so much for being here.